Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lonely Artist Podcast. I'm your host, Ariane, and today I have a very special episode for you as I'll be interviewing one of my friends and an amazing photographer. Catherine is a lifestyle photographer with a bachelor's degree in photography from Sheridan College. She's someone who never really thought of herself as a creative person until she picked up a camera as a teen. She has now been working as a photographer full-time and part-time for the last 2 years and can't get enough of it. Actually, I'm pretty excited because you're the first person that I've ever interviewed for the podcast that I actually know in real life.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, everybody else, have just been people that I look up to online and that I just reached out to and asked them to come on to the show. But yeah, it's kind of cool that actually I know you for real.
Perfect. That's so fun. That's exciting.
Yeah,
I
and this
guess
is also, oh, sorry, yeah?
I was just gonna say there's a bit of a rapport there already. We already
Mhm.
kind of know each other at least a little bit. We met
Yeah.
once,
I mean, we've existed in the same
and we've been
space,
chatting.
you know?
Yes, that's very true.
It's also been, this is the first time that I've ever done like a video for the podcast. So it'll be nice to see the face of the person I'm interviewing in the YouTube video.
Awesome.
Because that's
Yeah,
always
my
like,
background is jacked, but that's fine.
it looks perfectly fine. Don't worry.
I'm an artist. Things can be a little messy.
Exactly. Yeah, you're totally right. I'm just lucky that I get to use this like white wall so I can hide all my mess on the other side of the camera.
Yeah, yeah. Perfect.
Well, I actually, it's interesting because I've only interviewed illustrators, right? So I was really trying to ask you or think about questions to ask you to like talk about something different, something that I'm not personally good at or that I have any experience with. I mean, I do take pictures here and there, like most of us do now with our phones and all that, but
Mhm.
nowhere near doing this for a living or being a photographer for reals.
Right, right.
So I was wondering what inspired you to start photography in general?
Honestly, it was one photo that I took on a cell phone.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Um, I was like 13 or 14. I worked with my brother who was kind of like in the music industry, and he did mostly sound and lighting for live concerts and bands and stuff.
Mhm.
And so I would follow him around and help set up and tear down. And there was one show that he had where he's like, "Hey, Catherine, take my phone and go just take pictures of the bands." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, sure." So I went and I took photos, and because I knew the bands for the most part, and I knew the lighting and when the light was going to change and stuff like that, there was this one photo that I like really, I knew, I didn't know that I really wanted to get it, but I was like, oh, this is always like my favorite part of this one song.
Mhm.
And I was like, I'm going to take a picture of it. And so the photo was, so it was like this metal band, and the lead singer like stood at the front of the stage and like screamed into the microphone for like a long like moment. And the lights always went red in the background, and they would turn off the lights lighting his face,
Mhm.
just so that it was like this red wash in the back, and he was silhouetted. And so I took the picture, and I was like, okay, cool, like that was fun, and just didn't think anything of it, continued taking pictures, and then once it was done, helped tear it down, everything was great. Then a couple weeks later, my brother was like, hey, that one shot that you took is amazing, and we're going to use it as the portrait or like the posters for the next shows. And I was like, okay, that's crazy, but sure. So, and after that, it was just like that's where I started. I started as kind of a band photographer,
Oh,
and I
wow,
didn't
I
get
had no
paid.
idea.
And it was just crazy. I find there's a lot of people I know even who, picked up a camera at the age of 2 and, couldn't put it down. And that just wasn't what it was for me. And it was just this one photo of a band, of a singer. And it was just really kind of funny. It was something that I ended up being okay at. And then I was like, all right, maybe I can make a living off of this. Maybe we can figure this out. And then, yeah, it just kind of grew from there.
Do you still have that photo?
I don't actually.
No, I was
I
gonna be
know.
like, please send that to me. I want to like put it up in the video, but I guess
Oh
it's
no.
it's hard to save some photos. I feel like now in the digital era of photos, it's harder to save them and store them and keep them than when you used to have, your printed photos and you'd store them in a little album. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And honestly, like even in the last couple of years, I lost a whole bunch of photos because one of my drives broke,
Mm.
and it wiped everything, and there was no way I could recover it. And it was all of my work that I did in college
Oh
is
no.
gone. And I had some trips, like I went to Iceland, and all of those photos are gone.
Oh my God. That's just
Yeah.
devastating. I've had some accidents with my drives and I'm just like, it's just too painful.
It's a
And yeah.
nightmare.
Yeah, I feel you there. It's pretty sad.
Yep. So once I really like, I think in the next few years, what I'm gonna do is do what my teacher did. So he always had one large drive at home, and then he had another one at a super top secret location, which was his mom's. And then he would, every time he went to go visit his mom, he would switch them, and then upload onto the one that was at his mom's, like his new stuff, and then continue working on that. And then just in case like his house catches on fire or something, he has like an extra backed up. And yeah, so we'll see.
We should definitely all practice having like a double backup just in case.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
I'm gonna follow in your friend's advice and do that.
Seriously. For top secret location.
Yeah, although if I did it at my mom's house, it would probably just get thrown into the garbage or something. So definitely not that place.
Fair, fair.
So tell me, what's the thing or subject that you like to shoot the most?
I think right now it's people, and for a couple of reasons. First, it's a bit out of convenience. There's kind of always people who want photos taken, and there's always people getting married, and they need photographers and different things like that. Um, and so that's kind of how it started. I didn't really like photographing people, but then once I really started, it's actually a lot of fun because you just it's really it's really neat to find what people love and to get them to think about it so they can smile. You know what I mean? Like I love capturing people's smiles and like their place where they're most happy. So I try and like create situations for people. So if it's a couple, I'll ask one of them to like, okay, here's a kiss challenge. So, kiss them 1,000 times in 30 seconds, and it has to be 1,000 times,
Oh my God.
and so they end up just like kissing their partner like a whole bunch, and then it's like, and then everybody's smiling and everybody's happy, and then it's just like, I don't know, it's just you capture that love and you capture that moment. Or if it's like someone, like if it's an individual, just get them to walk around, get them to like, I don't know, feel themselves, just like make them feel good, because it's just because that's what cameras are for, that's what pictures are for.
Yeah.
It's to make people feel good, and a lot of people are pretty comfortable in front of cameras, and so it's the finding ways to make people slightly more comfortable and just be themselves in front of the camera has been difficult but very rewarding and very fun and interesting, and because no one thing is going to do like the same thing for two people, right?
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, it's a lot of fun, but I
It's a
do
really
really
creative.
enjoy.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to say, I do really enjoy photographing everything right now. So I'm trying not to pigeonhole myself too much, just because
Mhm.
I'm still figuring it out. I'm still looking to find what I love doing. And I think that's going to happen with time. Like I love food and food photography, mostly because I love eating food. But um, yeah, and like product photography is really cool. I like capturing moods. I think that's like
Okay.
what it is. Because like when you see a plate of food, you just get into this like mood of, oh, I'm hungry. I want to chat with people. Like dinner is such a cool um, time because that's when families get together. That's
Hmm.
when people just like chat more, and food brings people together. Um, and it's the same thing with ads and like product ads, that perfume is going to make you feel a certain way, right? And it's telling that story, it's telling that um, idea and trying to get it across to people in a simple way that people will understand. So um, however that happens, I really love doing it, whether it's people or products or food or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's actually kind of cool that you don't really have necessarily one specific subject that you like to photograph. And definitely, I feel like with time, it just changes and you do certain things at some point in your life, then you just do some other things at some point of your life. And it's good to have that flexibility. And also, I find that very interesting that you do those creative challenges to loosen people up to being in front of the camera. And that is actually perfect for my next question because I'm super curious about this.
Okay.
Well, you're meeting people obviously to photograph them if you're doing portraits or just photos of people. And I wonder now with everything that's going on and COVID and pandemic, and like, how are you navigating that? How are you getting people comfortable with this new issue that you're probably going to have to deal with? And how has it been to photograph people post COVID?
Yeah, it's been really hard. Particularly because I mean now in here in Canada we're just barely out of another lockdown, and during those times I'm technically not allowed to be working because of the laws and different things that are going on. And so this year has been really tough with just work in general. But I think there are people who are still wanting photos, and because of this pandemic, it's made people want to cherish their families a little bit more.
Hmm.
Um, and it's kind of brought that out in people. But for the most part, I mean, as a photographer, especially outside when it's warm, it's not too like stressful because I can just have a long lens and stay farther away from people. I have no problems wearing a mask and different things like that. But the funny thing is, when you wear a mask, you have to be a little more animated everywhere else. So you'll see me jumping around and like waving my arms and, you know, doing dances, trying to get people to smile and laugh. And I think one trick that I have for any time is just to be silly. Like I feel like I'm a fairly silly person anyways. So if I'm just myself and silly, people love to laugh at that, or like love to laugh and be with that, because then
Yeah,
if I'm silly, they don't feel silly.
of
And
course.
it's and that's I love it. Like that's part of who I am. That's part of what I love to do. So um it helps when people are stressed
Of
and
course. Yeah.
when people are worried. And another thing is just to reassure them that, we're going to be outside, which is the safest place you can be. I'll be wearing a mask. So, I mean, if I'm further away and it's, really, really hot outside, I always ask, I say, hey, is it okay if I take my mask off and just, leave it hanging? A lot of people have been okay with that. And if I do need to get closer, I'll put it on and then move closer. Um, but yeah, it's a lot about having moments of stress free times. And
Hmm.
I try to make my sessions that, right? So I photographed a couple of weddings over the summer, and they were my first weddings I've ever photographed on my own. And um, they were supposed to be large weddings. They were supposed to be, 150 plus people. And um, there was a lot of changes. It was really tough on the like couples, and
Of course, yeah.
honestly, just being flexible. I mean, nobody knew a global pandemic was going to happen, right? So,
Exactly, yeah.
it's just trying to be understanding and being as flexible as possible. And thank goodness I was in the position to be flexible. So both of the weddings, instead of canceling, they just had what they called mini monies. And so we just had a very small thing. I wore a mask, and we did what we could, and we made it work. And honestly, they were beautiful. I loved them, and my couples were so good with like just still making it what they wanted it to be, and still like not letting it get them down. And that helped me too, right?
Yeah.
That idea is infectious. And so just trying to portray that and portraying positive vibes and energy, because we only like it's been a tough year, and everybody knows it and everybody's felt it. And so just trying to be that positive person, and a sea of negativity is
Yeah.
something that I try.
Well, and definitely I feel like when you are taking pictures of people, they feed off of you and you feed off of them. So the reason why you're trying to be this like really energetic is because you want them to match that energy and just make it a good experience. And definitely from my experience taking photos with you, that was like I had such a good time. I wouldn't say I'm a person who's super serious all the time, but I'm definitely not as hyped as I was that day. And I was
Yeah.
like pretty impressed at how like hyper I felt taking pictures. And
Perfect.
it was just a very nice experience. And actually think that maybe in some ways, even though it was very inconvenient for the couples to have smaller weddings, for you as a photographer being your first weddings by yourself, that must have helped a bit, because obviously you don't have to worry about so many people and taking so many pictures, right?
It
Of everybody.
was it was very relieving. Yeah, it changed the dynamic, and but it did make it so much more intimate, and so and yeah, a lot easier to navigate. I wasn't as nervous because it was just kind of a family session, it was just a large family session. And you have to get the kiss. So
Of course.
that was just that was it was really interesting. And honestly, because I've assisted other photographers in doing large weddings before, and they're fine. They're really good for a lot of people. But now that I really think about it, like I really like smaller weddings. So that might be something that I sort of specialize in rather than doing larger weddings. Just do smaller weddings really, really well.
Yeah, because also I feel like, well, I don't know if I ever told you this, but one of my sisters is a photographer as well,
Oh,
and
perfect.
she does not do weddings because they're so stressful and there's so many things that there is certain pictures that you must get and you can't fail on getting those pictures.
Nope. Nope.
So like I can totally see why you'd like those more intimate sessions, and I think there's definitely something special about capturing small gatherings rather than large ones, for sure.
It
And
is.
yeah, no, totally agree with that. And also I was wondering if, considering that you, from my experience, are a blast to be around, and you always try and give off the best energy you can for your sessions, I was wondering if you've ever had any experience where you felt really stressed and it was hard for you to take pictures of somebody.
Yes. Yes. There have been a few times where even just initial contact, so whether it be through like Messenger or Facebook Messenger or text or calls, there have been a couple times where even just the first messages were just kind of like, yeah, we want photos, but we don't look good in camera and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, great. Like, that's fine. We're totally going to work on that. Like, I will help you pose. I'll help you do that. And like, they just didn't really feel like they wanted photos.
Mm.
And
Okay.
it was interesting because it's like, then why are you asking me to take photos? But it was just, yeah, it was just very interesting. And then the day of, you could tell that they just didn't want to be there. And it was not the best because it was a bit of a cooler day. It was overcast. So just in general, people's mood kind of slumps in those sort of situations. But I went in, best foot forward, like screaming and kicking, and just sort of tried my best. And like closer to the end, they were feeling a little more receptive, but it was just the whole time like it felt like pulling teeth sometimes.
Oof. That sounds so rough.
And it was so hard because I would I love taking photos of people, and I couldn't find that one thing that was going to get them to be happy or figure it out. And honestly, like those days happen, and there are days where people like on one day would be extremely happy and willing to do whatever needed to be done. But the next they don't. And so I try not to judge people on those days because that could just be a fluke, right?
Of course, yeah.
But of course, after I'm like, dang it, what was that thing that I could have done? And like I beat myself up more than the family.
Oh.
But you just work through it, right? And you're never gonna have perfect days. You're never gonna you're never gonna have all perfect days. You will have perfect days, and they are amazing. But it's just figuring it out. And now, like, because I've been through that, I have something to look back on in case that comes up again. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I tried these things, they're not working, let's try something else. So one thing that helped was they brought their little dog, and it helped. So it helped to like pick the dog up and like snuggle it and like different things like that, right?
Almost like a prop, but it's a dog.
But it's a dog, yeah. And so the dog was in almost all of the photos. I'm like, nope, the dog's gonna be there.
Who's complaining about photos with dogs? Like, I don't think
It's
anybody
true.
minds.
It's true. But yeah, so it was a tough one. And yeah, you just work through it, and sometimes you just grit your teeth and take the best photos you can and
Yeah.
hope for the best. And honestly, like we got some really good shots. And again, I think it's having, like, rather than telling your clients to like stand there and look at me and smile, have them stand there and, you know, like look around at each other and like make silly faces. Because then
Yeah.
because like right after they make silly faces, they're all laughing, and then you take the picture, right?
Yeah.
So, and if the kid has a silly face and everybody else is laughing, that's fine. Like that's just a moment, right? Like especially if the kid's particularly silly, like that's it's about finding the moments rather than the poses. I
And
think
and
helps a lot.
and I feel like the best photos are always the most candid ones, the ones that are not necessarily posed, just the ones where people are just forgetting that the camera is there, basically.
And that's it. I like to call it like planted, because you set up like a situation, so it's not completely candid, but so you set up the situation, but then you just let the people kind of do what they would normally do in that situation, right? So there's a I was listening to what was it, a Creative Live like class, and she's a child and family photographer. And so what she does is she sets up she asks the parents, like, what are 3 things that your kids like to do together? And so it would, for example, like one, like playing tea or like tea time. There's another where it's like I don't know, playing in their tent that they have. And something else. And so they would go and they would set up those situations before the photographer gets there, and the photographer would like go through and help them set it up and sort of figure out exactly what they want it to look like. But then they just let the kids in and do their thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's planned, but it's also candid.
It's like replicating reality, sort of.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's true. And it's so funny now that I'm talking with you. I'm kind of realizing that within the art community, I feel like photographers have got to be the most extroverted artists out of everybody else. Because like I obviously have had tough customers and stuff like that and clients, but it's so much easier because I'm hiding behind my camera. I'm working on my drawings and not really interacting with anybody, but you're like there with them, face to face.
Yeah. And honestly, the easiest thing to do, and the one thing that I found has really helped as a photographer, because I don't consider myself as an extroverted person. I pretty much identify with being introverted, but with extroverted, or like I can pretend to kind of be extroverted.
Okay.
And I wouldn't even say pretend. I love being bubbly, but it just takes, I find recharging for me is definitely at home reading a book.
Yeah.
Like, I don't thrive on being outside, but I can, interacting with people. But honestly, it's definitely that feedback loop where if you're happy, they're happy. And if they're happy, you're happy. And you just feed off of each other, which is honestly the best thing ever. But one thing that I found has really helped too is you always ask what photos they want. Because then you get them. And then after, it's just playtime.
Like, yeah, this is true. Like you can just get the ones that you have to get, and then anything else can just be spontaneous, sort of,
Exactly. And then what you do is, and you do the photos that they want to the best of your ability, even if they're going to look silly or they're not going to look great, you do them as best you can. And then you do the same thing, just the way you wanted to do it. And then it sometimes turns out better. And you give them both to the client, and the client really likes whichever one they like. Right. And it's very subjective, which is really neat too. But I do find like asking exactly what they want and checking those off first, because then after it's like, all right, let's just have fun. And then they relax too. And so you get some really relaxed photos, especially when parents have young kids that they're like, oh, I don't know how they're going to react, or I don't know how they're going to figure it out. But when it comes to kids, it's definitely the kids run the sessions. You don't tell them that. But the kids run the sessions. So if they're not feeling it, they're not feeling it. We're going to take photos of something else. And we're just going to kind of work with what they have, right? Because kids aren't just going to magically be happy when they're not. Right?
Yeah. So, kids don't work that way. They just do what they do.
They don't. And we can control our emotions, and we can control the way we react. So I always tell parents to bring like one or two things that their kids really love and that they can play with in the pictures, and you won't mind. Or I find with like older kids, like slightly older kids, like there was this one kid who brought a superhero doll with him, and he would not put it down. He wouldn't. And his mom didn't want the superhero doll in the pictures.
Oh no.
And so I bargained. I was like, hey, Betty, like, how about we do one without flash, and then one with. And then, he was like, at first he complained, but then I was like, dude, like, I promise I'll take the photo with you in flash. Like, I can do that. And then he's like, okay. And so, it took a couple times, but we got it, and we got the photos without flash. And, we ended up working it out. And then the one girl really loved to dance. Like, she wouldn't stop moving. And so we figured it out. I got everybody to dance. And then we got a fun picture of everybody dancing. And I was like, okay, like now we're going to stand really, really still for this one. And like made it a challenge, right?
Yeah. And, sounds like a lot of negotiating,
Negotiating.
Especially with kids.
Oh yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
It's fun. it's a neat way to sort of think about it. But yeah.
For sure. Oh yeah. And you know, I was also wondering, whenever I ask artists about their craft, I always get to this question of asking them about their style, because I feel like in arts, in like illustration specifically, it's very easy to identify styles. But with photography, I think it's a little bit more nuanced. And I wanted to ask you, do you feel like you have a specific style in your photography?
Um, yes and no. It really depends. And I think style, particularly in photography, changes very rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you kind of first start, it's, and by first start, I mean within the first 10 years of like being a photographer,
Yeah.
um, it really does change because because style is, you know, the composition of the photo, it's the like the vibes of the photo, it's the editing and how you
Mhm.
edit it after, it's the cropping, it's there's so many different aspects to it. And um, yeah, I think for me, like I really love colorful images. So um, I might like saturate my images just a touch or,
Mhm.
you know, do a few things like that. And I find it's easier to ask like a friend and be like, hey,
Okay.
what's my style? Because you don't notice it at first, like you don't know what it is.
True.
Um,
Very true.
and other people, especially people who know your work, can be like, oh yeah, no, your colors are really vibrant, or
Mhm.
um, you know, you always have like people smiling, or you always do this one like particular crop and it's just interesting and cool, um, and different things like that.
Yeah.
but uh, but yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard. And I can tell, like, you know, when I look at other people that, like, other photographers that have been in photographing for 30, 40 years, I can be like, oh, that's, you know, a Paolo Reversi, or that's like Vivian Sasson. But it's so hard to say why.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, for sure. Identify specifically what it is that makes you know that it's them.
mm-hmm. And
Mhm.
sometimes I'm wrong. Like sometimes I'll be looking at an image and be like, oh, that looks like this person. And then I'll Google it and it's not at all. And I'm like, oh, well, oops. You know? And I think because we pull from so many different types of photography and so many different people,
Yeah.
that it shows up in our work. It shows up in what we do and why we do it. So,
Yeah. Of
mhm.
course. That's definitely true. And like I
Oh,
said,
yeah.
I feel it's nuanced, and it's a bit harder too with photography. So because the subject will always be different, and like the day will always be different, and so it will be hard to get the same style every single time you take a photo. Or
And that's it. And I
Mhm.
feel as though, like, I feel people, like, once they figure out the exact photography that they want to do, you can sort of start developing a um, a style,
Mhm.
because you're kind of doing the same type of photography, right?
Yeah.
So when you're jumping between product and you're jumping between, so yeah, product and portrait, or weddings and something else, it's really hard to develop a style because your subject matter changes so much.
Of course.
But if you just do weddings and you know that, like, oh, this edit is really good on like 80% of my weddings that I shoot because I shoot in a particular way. Like
Yeah.
once you develop that and once you do things often enough, you kind of develop like what looks good, and that ends up becoming your style.
Mhm.
Um, so I find I don't have a style right now because I'm jumping between 30 different things at some point. Um,
Yeah.
but but my one friend, she's very much, I mean, even now her style changes a lot, and I don't know why, but like I can always tell her photographs. Um, and it's really interesting. And then there's another girl who I graduated with from Sheridan, and she is very much like a beauty and like fashion photographer.
Mm-hmm.
And I can almost always tell that like what her photograph is. Like when it comes up, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's
That's them.
Burke. Yeah, like that's Burke photography. And
Yeah.
it's just like it's really neat. And I don't think I have that yet.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like somebody else can be like, oh no, totally. Like you always shoot this way. Or you
Yeah.
always shoot this way, or you always edit this kind of way.
It's harder to know, like, when you're looking at it from your own perspective, because you're always going to be like your toughest judge. Wait, what's the word for it?
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
your biggest
critic.
critic.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, that's definitely, I feel like, and even I personally find it very hard to identify my own style in art. So I can definitely see why you would feel the same way. And similarly, I also like jump from sort of style to style or subject to subject. I'm always trying to learn it, and maybe it's because we're at a point where we're still building our experience, so it's definitely going to be malleable all the time. It's going to be changing constantly. And I also wanted to ask you, I don't really know many things about equipment and things like that, but I assume that that can also influence style. And I was wondering what kind of equipment you carry around usually, well, at least right now, and what would you say would be a good starting point of, like, for people who want to become photographers and don't really have much of a budget for it?
For sure. I think so. What I carry around right now, for the most part, for most outdoor portraiture, um, is so my camera, which is a Nikon D750, two lenses. I have one that's a prime 50mm lens.
Mm-hmm.
It only goes down to 1.8, but that's all you really need. Um, and then what else? So yeah, that's one lens. I bring a telephoto lens with me. It was honestly just a kit lens. It goes from 27 to 127 or something. It's just a kit lens. It zooms. It's really good for getting. Like, honestly, I mostly use that lens,
Okay.
which is awesome, especially with kids, because then you can, and families, because it's a little bit of a faster lens and you can kind of zoom in and get like a really quick shot. If the kid's doing something really cute or something, you can just like zoom
Yeah.
in and click if you're doing like a wide family shot. I almost always bring like a speed light with me, just in case. I barely use it, but I always bring it just in case. Um, what else do I bring? A reflector. I almost always bring a reflector.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I have an assistant, it's really nice to bounce light back into the shadows.
Yeah.
If I don't have an assistant, I get really fancy with trying to hold it while also holding my camera.
Oh my God.
That's fun. Memory cards, lots and lots of memory cards,
Of course.
small memory cards too.
Do you also have extra batteries with you, or do you not?
Yes,
Oh,
I
okay.
have two batteries. They're always both in my camera.
Mm.
It's fun. So both batteries. One battery is always in the camera. The other battery is always in the battery grip.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that they're always fully charged. I only have the two right now. I probably should get more.
Okay.
But I find typically like the two batteries, even after having it for 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
can last a full 10-hour day with
Oh
no
wow,
issue.
that's a lot, actually.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
that's with taking 2,000 photos. Like
Mm-hmm.
she's pretty good with that. But yeah, so those are pretty much the things. So my camera, two lenses, a flash or a speed light, a reflector, and lots of memory cards.
Was that like your starting gear when you started taking photos after you took your, cell phone photo that inspired everything?
Kind of. So I moved to like right after that. I just had a point and shoot camera.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of looked like a professional camera, but you just couldn't change the lens on it.
Okay.
The lens was like stuck.
Mm-hmm.
But it had like an optical zoom and different things like that. So I started using that right after the cell phone picture, and that helped a lot. It was really interesting. I kept it on auto. I didn't really look into manual or doing anything with the settings on the camera. Um, and then, yeah, and then I had a photography class in high school, and it was pretty much just, again, like a point and shoot. We didn't have really the option to change lenses or anything. So that was pretty much it. But then, yeah, I moved to pretty much this guy in college and after that. So yeah, but I would say for people who are looking to start, honestly, like I would get like a cheap camera. It doesn't, so my camera is a full sensor. There's a difference between full sensor and crop sensor.
Okay.
Crop sensor are much less expensive. They are slightly lower quality, but honestly, they work so well. And nowadays, like a crop sensor lens is just as good. You just get like a smaller image. You won't get as much. You'll still get detail, but like you can't blow it up to the size it needs to be for like larger prints or just different things like that.
Yeah.
I would invest in like um like for example like a Canon T3i or something. I'm more of a Nikon person myself, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of really good even point and shoot Nikons. Like the D60 is really good. That are a little less expensive. They might be 500 new. You can probably buy used. And
Yeah,
then
I got
yeah,
myself I think it's a T5i from Canon, and
okay.
it was refurbished and it was really cheap. Like, and I'm not a photographer, but sometimes I use it for my videos on YouTube, and it works pretty well. I mean,
Yeah, honestly. And one thing that I'm a big advocate for is the fact that like if you want to be a photographer, use the stuff you have. Like because it really isn't about the equipment at
yeah,
the end of the day. Like you can start with an iPhone. You can start with the phone that I used was a BlackBerry back over 10 years ago.
wow.
Like 12 years ago, and that's what got me started. Like it's not about the equipment. It's about what you do with it.
I love that.
And
It's a great advice for everybody because a lot of people like make up excuses like I don't have the equipment, so I can't do it. But it's great that you say it, especially it's good to hear it for somebody who's doing it now professionally. I was also wondering, do you have any like interests besides photography that are art related? Do you like to, I don't know, draw or sing or whatever?
yeah, so I love to sing. I'm
Really?
Yeah, I'm not good at it. I'm sorry. I'm okay at it. I am not really a solo singer. I'm very much so I used to sing in a choir and in a competing choir in high school, and that was a lot of fun. That was a very much a way for me to like have like an outlet, and it was really great. I love singing in the shower. Um, but one thing that I really love is lyrics. I'm very much a lyrics person. If, you know, I could love songs that everybody else hates because even if it's a crappy song, I still love the lyrics. Somehow the lyrics just vibed, you know? Um, so something that like I used to do a lot and that I'm kind of starting to get back into is like listening to lyrics and listening to poetry and different things like that and creating images from that.
Yeah, well, that was actually going to be my follow-up was how do you incorporate your other interests into your work? But you just said it, so there you go.
Perfect. Perfect.
You
Yeah,
just did my work for me.
I try. No, it's honestly it comes from everywhere, and like other photographers' work is really inspiring to me. Um, you know, but I don't know things I find, and so when I was younger, and even up till like 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't really consider myself a creative person.
Okay.
And that's because I didn't paint, I didn't sculpt, I didn't do any of those things, and I thought you had to do those things in order to be labeled creative. but I've realized recently that like people have creative solutions to problems. People, have creative ways to lay out spreadsheets that make them easy to follow,
Yeah.
and there's so many different ways to be creative. And now that I'm an adult, um, I'm starting to learn new things, and I'm starting to crochet. And
That's such a COVID thing to do.
seriously, like I have this doll that I'm
Oh my
making.
God. Did you
Like
do that?
this is my first project.
Dude, that's amazing. Like,
I still have to add on
wow.
the ears and stuff, but yeah,
Wow,
this is
kudos to
Walter.
you. I think I'm gonna have to ask you to make me one for my, like, from my dog that looks like my dog, because that's
For
just too
sure.
cute.
I will definitely try. But that was from like a pattern that I looked up on YouTube, and
Mm,
it's fun. And like, I want to try painting, and I say I'm bad at it, but I haven't tried. I haven't practiced. I haven't done any painting. So,
yeah.
I could eventually be okay at it.
I
Right?
mean,
And
you're definitely as good as everybody else has been when they all started. So, there's
mhm.
always that starting point for everybody in
and
everything.
and that's the thing. I'm comparing myself now, who has never painted before, to or drawn to you, or who's really good, or to like other painters who have been painting for 20 years. And that's like
Exactly.
not really not good for anybody to do. And I know a lot of people do it. And it's the same thing with photography. Like,
Hmm.
I'm really only 2 years into my career,
Yeah.
and only part of it has been full time.
Hmm.
Um, so, but I often compare myself to people who have done this for full time for 40 years. And it's like, there's no point, because you're only going to make yourself feel bad,
Yeah, there's no way
you
at
know?
all that you could compare yourself to that
No,
experience,
use
for
it as
sure.
inspiration, but don't compare it,
Yeah.
because
And talking
everybody
about
has.
inspiration, who would you say are your biggest art inspirations at the moment?
Ooh, so I have a lot. And again, I feel like I'm changing a little bit with regards to my business and the way I've been thinking about it.
Hmm.
But I've been really into people who create stories. And there's a lot. I had to write them down, because I was like, wait, who is that person? Who is this person? Um,
I'm terrible at remembering names. Like, I'll
Same.
have people I look up to and I never remember what their names are, so I totally
Oh yeah.
understand.
Or like I'll have an image in my head, and I'm like, wait, who took that? Like, I don't know. Um, but yeah, so like Paolo Reversi is a really cool photographer. Vivian Sasson, she does a lot of like fashion stuff, but it's really neat. She likes to experiment a lot, and I think it's really, really cool. Vivian Mayer, she was a so if I remember correctly, she actually just like she took photos every day, but she didn't really get them developed,
Hmm.
and they were hidden in her attic. And then she passed, and there was like thousands and thousands of images that
Oh,
weren't
wow.
developed, and then they were. And now Vivian Mayer is a photographer, and she's known as a photographer, and it's really neat and interesting.
That's wild. That's actually super interesting.
Yeah, I love it. So there's Vivian Mayer. Tim Walker, again, is another like fashion photographer, but I just love his like I want to say style, but like I love the way he photographs, and I love the imagination he puts behind the images,
Hmm.
which is really cool. And I know it's probably a team of people as well, but even in some of his like personal work is really, really cool.
Hmm.
Um, there's another girl, Olivia B, and her photos are so whimsical. Like they're they're just her tones are darker, but they still have such a light um, feel to them, because most of them are, I wouldn't say children, but like younger people.
Hmm.
And they have like face paint and like just tutus and stuff like that, and it's so whimsical. It's really pretty. Then Irving Penn, he's a huge well-known photographer. um, I like a lot of his like, I want to say still life photography. So he's a really interesting guy. When you first look at it, you're like, what the heck is going on? But there is definitely a story to it. There's definitely an art to it, which is really cool. And this last one, her name's Sig Harvey, and she is really cool because she moved into an apartment after leaving like a significant other, and she moved into like this really really small apartment in New York, I think. That could be wrong, but anyway, she moved into this really small apartment. The whole thing was white, and she just started taking photos of herself. And she's like, I want to take photos. I want to get good, but I only have me. And so, and this space. So she spent like a full year taking photos of herself in this space, and they're beautiful. Like what she does, and she went out in the fall once and like grabbed bags and bags and bags of leaves. She had this idea of like photos with leaves, and
That's so cool.
and so she was like, she has tons of photos of her like throwing leaves and doing all that, but the one photo that she loved the most was there was a single leaf like floating in the area, and she was just there. I can't remember exactly what the photo looks like, but she's in the photo.
I'm definitely gonna look it up, and I'm just gonna look everybody up, because even though I don't know them, I always look at photographers and their work for reference and inspiration for my drawing. So I'm always super excited to,
Nice.
find more photographers to look at. So that's so cool. Do you have any other photographers you'd recommend that are maybe a bit smaller, that maybe even yourself, that you'd like to promote?
Yeah. So there's my friend, and she is just so good. I love her, and she is like, she is way further than me in photography because she like really practices every day. She is just, her growth has been amazing, but her main account is Michelle Leanne. So Michelle __ Leanne, Liane. Yeah, and then she has other accounts now, and like one of her accounts is called Auntie Shelly.
Okay.
She's like your fun aunt. And so she's been getting into film photography, and that's
Nice.
kind of where she's putting her film stuff, just because it's fun for her. She's not really like, we're kind of in the same space where we're trying, because this year has been so hard on us and everybody. We've been trying to get into a space where photography is fun again, because a lot of the times it's been hard. Like,
Yeah,
it's been hard when photography is something that you need to live on, and
for sure.
it's when you can't do it, you don't have money, and it's hard to live on it. And so it has gotten to be like a stressor almost. So we're kind of in the same spot where we're just trying to make it fun again, and trying to lessen that stress. But yeah, so she's amazing. Another woman that I think is really cool. She's not necessarily a photographer, but her images are really cool, and just her voice and her like what she talks about is really really cool. And it's called the Basic Bitch Blog.
Okay, love the name.
And she's amazing. She talks about grief. She talks about like fashion. She talks about just different things, and it's really interesting to read her blogs, because sometimes like I'll get images from it, like whether I take them or not, that's a different story, but I always find that like I'll have images in my head
Yeah. From it, right?
when I read her stuff. Yeah, she's funny, and she's just, yeah, she doesn't care what people think, and sometimes she does, and she'll write about it. She's very much a brain to Instagram type writer, and I love
Yeah.
it. Like, she seems very real, and one thing that I've been missing on social media is realness, and she is someone that is very real, and someone that I look at a lot.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be asking you for all of the names of everybody you mentioned so I can post those in the description for everybody
Perfect.
to go follow them. Because
Awesome.
I would hate it if people didn't, because it's not written down. And I know I'm
Right.
lazy. If I didn't have it written down, I would be like, it's never gonna
It's
happen.
never gonna happen. Yeah, I will
Yeah,
definitely like send them to you
thanks.
as well, just because they like, yeah, these people deserve everything. It's really cool. And like um another another friend, he again not a photographer but inspires me a lot. And so he owns a media company.
Hmm.
And so um like he manages bands and different things like that. And again, I think it's just going back to my roots with the band photography and stuff. And just the fact that I love music and I love like lyrics and different things like that. So I know a lot of these bands and what he's doing with them, and it's really great. So his accounts or his business is called Cat's Cove Media. And um, it's really funny because Cat's Cove is like his cottage. Like that's what his cottage is called.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's just it's amazing. And like he deserves a whole bunch of love too. Cause like again, he's such a nice guy, and his music and the way he deals with music and like the business behind it is like so genuine. And the music industry can be very toxic
Hmm.
with regards to like, you know, only certain bands can play at this like venue
Yeah.
because of relationships that they have. And if
That
you
sucks.
you know, and it's really hard to get into the music industry.
Hmm.
But yeah, he's been um, changing the way it happens, and it's really really cool.
I love that you are promoting people that are not necessarily photographers too, because just artists in general, as blogs or as music, it's just nice to be able to share that with everybody, and that's most definitely the goal of this podcast. So thank you for
Nice.
giving that to everybody, not just photographers.
Well, and it's nice because that's where I find a lot of my inspiration, right? Like I of course look at photos and I of course look at different things, but when I'm trying to branch out and I want to try something new, I definitely go to these people and
Hmm.
look at what they're doing and look at, you know, bands and different things like that, because like I just find so much inspiration from that. And because they're more of a feeling, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
looking for feelings to add images to or to create using a photo.
Like you said, the
Um,
moods, right, that you want to create
mhm,
and
mhm.
replicate. Well, do you have any plans for the future regarding your work and social media presence? Like this, do you have a plan for your art, like your work?
A little bit. I think this year has really helped me re what is it? Re anyways, this year's this year's helped me to um rethink what I think of photography.
Hmm.
And again, it was definitely that like I need like my photography to make money, and which is, you know, fine, but it got to be stressful. And so um, I think what I want to do is just have fun with it again, create stories rather than just images.
Hmm.
Um, and I think another thing that I've been really passionate about is um, like trying to tell people like essentially start with what you have, start with where you are, because like if you don't start, like everybody has a starting point and it's never going to be the same between two people. And it's really um yeah, no two people have the same journey. And like if you don't start, you'll never know. um
So true.
and that's it. And so I really want to try and inspire people to do that. And I think like particularly with social media, it's really hard when, you know, you have a business and you're trying to promote your business on like using social media.
Hmm.
You can it almost feels salesy. and
It does. It's horrible.
and yeah, and I'm just not that person. And so I haven't been posting because I haven't felt anything with it, you know, like I know that being a salesperson and is part of being a business, is part of owning a business. But I haven't been able to figure out how to do it in a genuine way.
Yeah. It's hard to
So
find the balance between being an actual human and promoting your work on social media, for sure.
exactly. And I've been struggling with that a little bit. And so I think with just with being not, I wouldn't say a mentor, but just being like an ally to other photographers and to other people, and to really help support other people, I think is something that I really want to start doing, because honestly, like that's what I like doing. And if people like that and they want to hire me, then great. You know, like it's a really fine line between being genuine. And I think, or it's really hard to be genuine on social media sometimes, but I think if that's who you are, then that's how you're going to make money. That's how you're going to get business.
Yeah,
It's just being yourself and finding people who like that person.
of course. And wouldn't it be the best for people to follow you because of who you really are rather than the image that you're portraying?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
just amazing food for thought that I really, really like that you said that, because I totally agree with that. And I always like to end the podcast with this question. It's my favorite question of all time. And I like to just ask, what magical power would you like to help you with your art if you could have any
Oh,
magical art power?
easy. Like, like, magic editing skills, like just instant editing.
Yeah.
I think that's like, I love when I'm in a mood to try things. I don't mind editing because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But when it comes to editing like weddings or different things like that, no, I want to be able to snap my fingers and then it's done. Just I don't I editing is not my favorite part of photography. And
Okay.
that is like once I figure out a style for a particular wedding, I'm like, okay, great. Like I'm done. I don't want to do anymore. But I still have 300 photos to edit. So
God bless the presets, because imagine if you had to do that
presets.
for like every single picture. That would
Presets
just
are
be
amazing.
insane.
Um, but and it's funny because like even if I do presets, I still have to go into every image and like adjust it a little bit or make sure it works. And that just
Yeah.
takes forever and I'm done with it sometimes.
Well, that's why you need the magical power, so that you don't have to do that.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. I just love what you have to say. I feel like your message is so genuine, and I definitely feel like in person, it's like you're a cheerleader when you're taking pictures of people. And I feel like in general, in your social media, you're being a cheerleader for everybody, which is just, it's hard to come by people who do that. And I really appreciate that about you. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you here so
Ooh,
that
thank you so
everybody could
much.
meet you.
Whew, I'm getting red.
Ooh, ooh.
Yeah, seriously. No, honestly, thank you so much. And I love what you're doing with this podcast and just giving people a platform to honestly promote themselves, but also give messages like this and give their own message of self encouragement or encouragement to others, and just giving people a space to talk about their journey because it's not the same as everybody else's. And hopefully, with
Exactly.
that, people will start to understand and start to compare themselves less to other people, because I feel like that's the biggest plague of today's society
So
is
true.
the comparison, and especially with social media being so readily available and so curated. And yeah, I think it's great, and thank you so much for having me and everybody else on. And thank you for being such an amazing and beautiful and lovely human being.
Thank you so much. So now you want to make me red. Okay, that's fine.
Right back at you, girl.
Well, I think this is a perfect place to end this. And again, thank you for coming. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'm going to let you go now.
Thank you so much. You
All right.
too.
Bye.
Bye.
And that was it for today's episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry about the constant background noise that you probably heard. It's just been a very busy day here in my street, so I hope it wasn't too much of a bother, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, because I found that Catherine had a lot of very interesting things to share with all of us that we should really think about when it comes to our creative journeys and for life in general.